Well, my friends, it's been 5 weeks since that joyous morning when we gathered and celebrated Jesus' victory over death, remembering the day when everything changed. Or did it? We meet several of the disciples pretty much back where they started, fishing. Perhaps in their grief, it's all they could think to do, to go back to their lives before Jesus came along and disrupted everything. Grief can be like that. But as it turns out, this time, their efforts are fishless. It may be that they are fishing for the wrong kind of catch. You see, once you've encountered Jesus, it's not that easy to go back to life the way it was before. They may not have realized it yet, but they have been changed. As they linger in the boat attempting to catch fish, Jesus makes his third post-resurrection appearance. But it is not until he speaks that they recognize the figure on the shore. In this time when they are no doubt feeling a variety of emotions, disheartened, afraid, frozen, Jesus returns one more time to remind them of their calling. He breaks bread with them, a meal filled with grace and reminiscent of the Last Supper. In another act of grace, he gives Peter a chance to affirm 3 times the one whom he had denied 3 times. And then he departs with this last instruction, "Follow me." I should note that this story is understood to be a late appendix to the Gospel of John, written by another author. Theologian Gerard Sloyan notes that while the author tells us it is the third appearance, it very much bears the earmarks of a first appearance. They were there with Jesus throughout his ministry on earth. They were there when he was arrested. They were there when he was condemned to death. They were there when he was crucified. And they were there when he appeared, risen from the dead. Yet they are still at a loss and return to their old lives. I wonder, with Easter behind us, are we renewed? Or has the high of Easter morning worn off? Does the good news of the gospel shine on our faces? Are we changed because of the risen Christ? It's easy and comfortable to fall back into our regular routines. It seems like there is always so much to do. Living in a high-paced major metropolitan area that is also the seat of government, sometimes it's easier to be people of the to-do list than the people of the book. Look at the disciples who were in shock, returning to their previous work as fishermen, but they weren't catching any fish. When along comes a man on the shore whom they don't recognize and who tells them to drop their nets on the other side of the boat. The result is such an abundance of fish, they can't even haul the net into the boat. Perhaps they are given something they needed even more, a change in perspective. I wonder what would happen if we dropped our nets on the other side of the boat. What if we broke out of our routines just a little bit? Taking time to do things that help sustain us and to grow in our faith, to gather with our fellow disciples, to intentionally take time for Sabbath, and to create new routines that help us care for our neighbors. It could be something as simple as smiling at everyone we encounter, or intentionally seeking opportunities to offer random acts of kindness. Perhaps offering hospitality by inviting our neighbors over to share a meal. if we intentionally lived out our baptismal promises, those we made or those made on our behalf, and seek to ensure that we live out our affirmative answer to the question we answered just this morning when we promised to guide and nurture Cameron by word and deed with love and prayer, encouraging him to know and follow Christ and to be a faithful member of God's church. What if everyone we encounter recognized the face of Jesus in each of us? What if these kind of actions planted a seed, or at the very least, changed, or even more, changed someone's life? Jesus gave Peter, and by extension, I would say us, what seemed to be 3 simple instructions. Feed my sheep, tend my sheep, follow me. But sometimes things that seem simple aren't as easy as we thought they would be. As a church, we do a pretty darn good job feeding Jesus' sheep, with food donations, the Help the Homeless backpacks, participating in the crop walk, the lunch packs, and regular donations to ECHO and our denominational hunger programs. I wonder how many of us react when we encounter the person at the intersection with the cardboard sign or the homeless person sleeping on the sidewalk. A positive engagement may come easily to some of you, but to be honest, I struggle in those situations. I'm striving to follow the example of a friend who keeps small bags of non-perishable food in her car, so she has something to hand out when she meets such people. I'm also trying at the very least to acknowledge the person, because on one level, it's a lot more comfortable to avert my eyes and keep walking or driving, which of course is neither feeding nor tending Christ's sheep. And tending Jesus' sheep means loving and caring for all the sheep, not just the ones we feel comfortable with, or drawn to, or agree with. We are still called to strive to live out the greatest commandment, to love the Lord our God with all our hearts, all our souls, all ourselves, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. The way I read it, everyone is our neighbor. We don't get to pick and choose. At our National Capital Presbyterian meeting this past Tuesday, the worship focus was on loving your neighbor. And a conversation was preached by Presbyterian Pastor Ruth Hamilton, Rabbi Sid Schwarz, and Dr. Margaret Johnson from the Ezra Bloom Mosque. And they were on the scripture readings about neighbors from Deuteronomy 6 and Mark 12, where Jesus recaps the reading in Deuteronomy. One of the most intriguing points made was the observation that you cannot command an emotion. And yet somehow we must strive to live out this commandment, because we are followers of Christ, whose lives, like the disciples, have been irrevocably changed by our encounter with Christ. We are living in a time where there is a great deal of divisiveness in our country over political ideology, social class and status, race, gender identity, sexuality. Pick an issue. We don't have to agree on everything, but we must be able to see each person we encounter as a precious child of God, truly listening, not formulating a response as the other person is speaking. That should help open the door to civil conversations where each person may be heard and change the tenor of the discourse. In his book, In Defense of Civility, How Religion Can Unite America on 7 Moral Issues That Divide Us, James Calvin Davis notes, Moral values need not be conservative, nor religious, for that matter, and exclusively equating moral values with conservative religion causes us to misunderstand the nature of our public disagreements. He notes that non-believers are equally committed to moral worldviews as religious people. The disagreements have more to do with which moral values should hold more weight. And at the same time, as Christians, we must speak out against injustice, and we must stand up and defend any of our brothers and sisters who are marginalized by their gender, faith, social or immigration status, or whatever it is that seems to make them different. We must, because there are too many who live in danger of emotional and physical abuse, and some even death. Choosing to follow Christ means choosing the full three-course menu, not the a la carte option. If we are to truly follow Christ and tend his sheep, we must attempt to do so in all aspects of our lives, which sometimes, maybe often, means being countercultural. Pastor Ben or I are in this pulpit every week, but as those who follow Christ, we are all called to preach the good news of the gospel, using words if necessary, to quote or misquote St. Francis, and to feed and tend to our neighbors. May God give us the courage to do so. Amen.